This is a conversation with Elizabeth Lewis for the Kentucky Marriage Equality and Religious Liberty Oral History Project. We are in the studio room of Breckenridge Hall on Morehead State's campus, located in Rowan County, Kentucky. It is 2:30 p.m. on June 10th. My name is Dakota Barr. First of all, I'd like to thank you for agreeing to meet with me today, Mrs. Lewis.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'd like to start with some biographical information, such as where you were born, where you grew up.
Okay. I was born in Pikeville, Kentucky, and my father passed away when we were pretty young, so we ended up moving to be closer to my mother's family. So I spent most of my formative years in Sandy Hook, Kentucky. So.
Can you care to tell me a little bit about your childhood experiences, what you liked doing as a child, and then?
I was a pretty quiet child most of the time. I spent a lot of time in my room reading, and other times I was mostly kind of outside. My mother owned about 150 acres, and it was all mostly woodland, so I spent a lot of time in the woods.
Do you care to elaborate a little on your religious upbringing and ideological background?
Let's see. I kind of grew up, my family went to church intermittently. Like, we weren't really churchy people, but we did go to church sometimes. And as I got older, teen years and such, I kind of kept up with it off and on. But the older I got, the more problems I had with church. I still have faith, but especially in the past few years, I've kind of lost a lot of respect for the institution of Christianity in general. Like, I love Jesus, but not so much his followers. So I guess mostly now I'd consider myself more spiritual or pagan.
Do you care to elaborate on why you lost touch with the church?
Well, my husband and I had moved, and so in trying to find a new church to go to, I would start going to one church, and then at some point it seemed like, whether it was intentional or just, sometimes it was just that they were well-meaning, but just really didn't know that they were preaching more of a conservative dogma than they were actually Christ's teachings, and they're kind of at odds with each other. But a lot of people that get into church kind of don't see that. So at some point I realized that it was kind of a dichotomy that I couldn't live with anymore. Yeah.
And what do you do today?
Mostly I just sort of have cobbled together my own practices of meditation, or like sort of thinking about the Reiki principles during my morning walk with the dogs. Just a little bit of I hate to say witchcraft. It's not exactly witchcraft. It's not Wiccan, but just things I've put together on my own. Just little rituals and ways of thinking and such.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm a licensed massage therapist.
All right, so how did you first become involved in the religious liberty or marriage equality movement?
Well, when after the SCOTUS ruling, I was really excited, because I had long felt that gays and lesbians should be allowed to marry. And I couldn't quite understand why anyone had a problem with it. So to me, it was like, finally. And when Kim Davis decided that she wasn't going to issue any marriage licenses, it really hit my big not fair button. This wasn't fair, to use your position of authority to prevent people from having the same rights that you do. So I just couldn't not act, if that makes any sense.
Was this the first time you acted upon such an issue, or would you consider yourself an active advocate in the past, too?
It was the first time I ever actually got into activism. Like I had my own personally held beliefs, but I had never actually gone and done any sort of thing as a protest or rally or anything.
So what were your initial thoughts when you first heard that the Supreme Court was trying such a case? And what were your views on the outcomes that would soon follow?
I didn't really follow the original cases all that much. Just when it was sort of announced in the news about the SCOTUS ruling, that I was just really excited. Was there more to that? Because I kind of lost my train of thought.
When you first heard the Supreme Court's decision,
Yeah.
you heard it on TV or wherever you heard
Yeah, I
it.
was just really excited.
How did you react? More so than excitement. What did you?
I don't think I had a lot of outward reaction, just, an inward sense of, I was very glad that this had finally happened.
Did you think that there were going to be any issues with the Supreme Court decision?
I thought in some of the more conservative areas of the United States that there probably would be some backlash to it, but I never dreamed it would be in my hometown.
Being your hometown, did that have any? Did that make your feelings stronger towards the matter?
I think it did, because I had a sense of not here. It just seemed like I had, I've lived in Morehead like 18 years, and I had heard before that the city was progressive and the county was more conservative. And I had never actually seen that personally. To me, it had always seemed like a progressive place, especially compared to where I grew up. And I was just like, here? This happened here? Somebody deciding not to do this here. And it was kind of like, not my town.
So you felt that this is the kind of issue that you would have saw elsewhere, but you never expected it to.
Yeah, I never expected it here in Morehead. I could have seen like some of the smaller, more conservative communities, like the Casey County or Whitley County. I kind of expected it there, but Rowan County's always been pretty progressive, in my opinion. So seeing a backlash here was really surprising.
If you had to describe your reaction to the clerk's decision not to issue the licenses, how would you paint that picture?
Well, again, I had the feeling of it's not fair. At first, I was a bit sympathetic to her, because I was sort of going through the same process, but on the opposite side, on my own, of realizing I did believe strongly in something, and it's really hard to make a very public, statement of your belief in something, especially if there's going to be a backlash. So at first I was a bit sympathetic to her for suddenly being just an average person and then being thrust into the spotlight. So I did, even though I disagreed with her, I did at first feel like a lot of sympathy towards her.
Do you think that your religious upbringing contributed to that at all?
I don't know. Maybe just my empathy as a human. And not so much a religious sympathy, but just empathy as a human.
Do you think that the clerk, Kim Davis, do you think that she best represented the cause of religious liberty?
Yeah, she did seem to have a lot of supporters on her side that kind of, fell in line with her way of thinking. So probably on her side, she was a good figurehead for that.
So after you heard the decision that the county clerk made to not issue marriage licenses to either straight or gay couples,
Yeah.
did you take any immediate action?
Of a sorts, I had seen on Facebook this guy had decided to make a protest or like a rally for love or protest for love. And I thought, well, I have to go. And so, a lot of us end up coming together for the first time for that. Just sort of gathering out at the courthouse and showing that we supported the, decision, the SCOTUS decision.
Do you believe that the events that you just described, did you consider them more of a protest against her decision, or did you consider them more of a unity rally?
For me, it was more of a unity rally. It was a coming together to show support for, same-sex marriage.
How many of the protests did you participate in? How active were you?
How active? I actually was down at the courthouse lawn probably 1 to 3 hours a day, like 3 days a week. So I was out there pretty frequently.
Did you participate in any of the satellite protests, such as at the jail or at the courthouses in other towns?
I did not. I wasn't, due to work schedule, I couldn't be out there as frequently as I wanted, but I had a pretty flexible schedule, so I did get to go out more than others would have.
At these protests, what would you describe the environment being like?
Initially, it was very peaceful. Some of the Kim Davis supporters, they would sit on the other side, and we would even check on each other. Do you need some water? Do you all need any snacks? We would kind of, because these are the people you live with. These are faces that you may not know them personally, but you recognize, passing acquaintances and such, that, these aren't enemies. You may have differing viewpoints. So it was very, very peaceful at first. As time went on and outside groups started coming in, it started getting really feisty. And there were a few times that I was debated, should I even go? Because this might be a little dangerous today. Yeah.
So at times you did feel unsafe at these protests?
Yeah, toward the end, some of the later protests, when the outside groups started coming in and things got really heated, and especially there was a flag that I carried a lot that was pretty divisive. And there were times I went out, I would just hug my kids extra tight. It's I'm not sure if I'm coming home today. I don't mean to over dramatize that, but I had the thought that might be the last time I see them, but at least they'll know that I did the right thing.
So in your eyes, these protests spanned much further than the hometown. People from all over started coming and participating.
Yeah, there were groups. I'm not even sure of the names right now, but I know Westboro was supposed to come in, or maybe did come in. I did get a few pictures of some of their vehicles, although I don't know if they actually came out in person on the days that I was there. Like I said, I don't remember the names of some of these groups, but they had a way of sort of agitating, and kind of agitating the atmosphere and getting people fired up.
Did you get people that weren't part of the community on both sides, or was it one-sided?
How do you mean?
People from other cities, you said outside groups came.
On our side, we didn't get a lot of outside groups coming in, although occasionally we had people that were traveling through that would just participate for a day, and even a couple of church leaders from churches in Lexington came in, which I was really impressed. We didn't have a lot of church backing from here in Morehead. Like, we would hear that, maybe this or that church was sympathetic, but no one actually attended. So I had a lot of respect for those that came in from Lexington and were with us here and there.
Do you think that these people from outside of the community, do you think that this issue should have been that big of an issue, or do you feel that this was more of a hometown issue?
Well, it was sort of both. It started out as it was a hometown issue, but it became a symbol for what was going on in various communities throughout the country. So I think I would have appreciated if some of the what I would term hate groups would have stayed out of Morehead. But it really did become a symbol for what was going on around the country.
Do you believe that your tactics at the protests, or do you think they were effective?
I think so. When we first started out, we didn't really have any tactics. We weren't sure how to handle it. As time went on, especially, I didn't get to attend any of the, what's the word I'm looking for? Any of the happenings like in Ashland at the courthouse. I didn't get to attend any of those. But that's where we first started seeing more of the hate coming out, especially like the news clip with the guy with the megaphone shouting at people, where some of us first learned to disengage. Just do not engage. Turn your back to them and don't even talk back. And so those that learned it there brought it back home, and we sort of taught each other, because it was very new for a lot of us. And you have this natural inclination of wanting to have a back and forth, and then you realize it's more powerful to just turn your back to it and ignore it and show that you're the stronger person. So,
would you have done anything differently at the protests?
There was actually one thing I would have done differently toward the end, where things were really heated. We had, the Love Wins crowd on one side, the more conservative people on the other side, alongside the front steps of the courthouse. And I do remember seeing this, I guess maybe his parents worked at the courthouse or something, but a school bus pulls up and lets off this little boy. And I saw him, and I just immediately saw through his eyes of like there's all these angry adults shouting at each other. And I wanted so bad to just go up and take his hand and lead him to the door. And then I thought, if I started second guessing myself, like if I go out there, people will think I'm trying to make some sort of point or agenda. And so the only thing I ended up doing was just like holding the door open for him. But I kind of wish that I had like gone out and sort of led this little boy to the door, just as a mother, I kind of felt for him. That may not have been the answer you were looking for, but that was probably the only thing I would change, was going back and walking the boy in.
What difference do you think that you personally made in the movement?
I became pretty recognizable as the person that carried the flag. A friend of mine had ordered a gay pride flag that had the field of blue stars, so it was like a combination American flag and gay pride flag. And there were a lot of people who didn't like it, but there were a lot of people who did. So, but he ended up kind of letting me borrow it because I could be out there more than he could. So there was I think I got kind of recognizable for that.
Did you become part of any organizations, or did you continue your activism after these events?
Well, a lot of us that met and came together and were kind of protesting alongside each other every day ended up coalescing into the Rowan County Rights Coalition, because after it was all said and done and finally marriage licenses were being given out, we're just like, now what do we do? There's this energy for change that we don't know what to do with. And so we just ended up forming our own civil rights group.
Do you believe such a group was necessary in Rowan County?
I think so. I guess I hadn't really noticed its absence prior to, but now that it's, the events have happened, I've noticed that, there are changes that need to be made, to both in like local political structure or just educationally. So I definitely think there is a need for it.
Can you tell me what kind of activities or events that you guys are currently working on?
Well, let's see. There's some members of our group have been volunteering at one of the local nursing homes, and it's elders are kind of a neglected community, and they appreciate the attention so much and the involvement, and they're really thrilled just that people come in and spend time with them and play bingo or read to them or whatever. One of our members is deaf, and she and her husband, with a couple other people, have managed to collaborate with the local cinema to have a movie night where they have like a movie with subtitles. And that one I think has been a little slow going, but there is definitely an audience for it once it gets to be more well known and more popular as people learn about it. I think that there probably is more of a hidden, deaf and hard of hearing community that would utilize that. Oh, and also we're organizing the Pride Festival. So,
tell me about that.
Well, it's just Morehead actually has like a pretty, large LGBT community, but it doesn't really get recognized. I think around here, when you're a little different in some way, you learn where to tone it down and try to get along with people. And sometimes you kind of need to let it out and show that, you're proud of who you are, because there's always this subtle message that kind of comes to you of, if you like this, you're not right. If you're like this, you're not right. Just being, I'm okay with myself. This is a good thing. Morehead does need pride.
Going back to the county clerk,
Mm-hmm.
do you believe that she deserved to be in prison?
I felt that there really did need to be some sort of consequence, but I kind of felt bad that she ended up being in prison, But I did feel that there was some sort of recognizable public consequence of you can't get away with this. So I'm not sure that imprisonment was the right answer, but on the other hand, I don't know what would have been. So kind of on the fence about that.
So do you think it was adequate?
I think so. I think maybe it got the message across, that maybe if she didn't do it, she at least had to allow it to happen in her office,
So in regards to the licenses being issued after her release, what was the goal for the protest, do you believe? Do you think that the goal was very anti-Kim Davis, or do you think that it was more, we need the licenses issued?
I think there was a little bit of both. At some point, the Love Wins crowd, we all managed to get along, but there were some who were a little more vocally, upset with her, and more that were just more supportive of, obtaining marriage licenses. We had the same goals, so, we're all on the same side, but we had different ways of showing it.
What were your thoughts on the reactions of your local elected officials?
I was disappointed that there wasn't more support for, the Love Wins community, or just showing support for the decision itself. They were largely silent unless they actually supported Kim Davis, in which case they were vocal about it. At the same time, though I was disappointed, it was also sort of expected, because when you're in the political arena, you don't really like to make waves. So it didn't surprise me over much that we didn't get much local political support, but it wasn't unexpected,
As you know, Morehead has a fairness ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that should have had any impact upon the actions of the local officials?
It should have. In theory, the fairness ordinance should be to uphold equality and make sure that there's no discrimination or people being treated unfairly. But, I don't think it really got followed through. There's a lot of differing opinions as to, the reasonings behind that. I don't want to call out any names.
What were your thoughts on the reactions of the mass media and several big players in the political field?
Well, I expected the mass media to kind of have a field day with it. I was surprised by how much political support Kim Davis had, with Ted Cruz and Mike Huckabee coming in and vocally, lending support. That was a little surprising. I kind of thought that people might actually distance themselves from her a bit, but I guess she was pretty representative of that side.
Do you think that the events that unfolded here in Rowan County deserve the nationwide attention they received?
I think perhaps so, because it really did sort of symbolize what was going on in many other communities across the nation. And people really latched on to, that this clash between, progressive and conservative and religious and more secular. It's a pretty big divide in the country right now. And so it did become that sort of symbol for it.
Do you think the reactions of the political leaders were one-sided or based upon political party, or do you think both sides had equal input?
I think more the conservatives were definitely coming out of the woodwork and being more supportive than sort of the progressives. I kind of wish we had seen more, just sort of any sort of support, from whether it was local or nation. It was just sort of our little band against the world almost.
What were your opinions on the outcomes of either the religious liberty or the marriage equality side?
Personally, I'm just happy that they're finally issuing licenses. Although, I have qualms and quibbles about it. She's still getting away with not doing her job. she's still trying to mix religion and state in her own subtle ways. She effectively got a slap on the wrist for not doing her job, and that personally kind of irritates me, but at the same time, I'm like, well, at least we're getting licenses to people, so there's a mostly good outcome.
So would you consider your efforts to be a victory?
I would. Even, it's a partial victory, but it's still a victory. Love won.
What do you think on the future of Rowan County? Do you think that there will be more problems similar to this in Rowan County in the near future?
I don't anticipate it. I think as time goes on and people get used to, well, this is just the way things are, that as more people get used to it, it will, eventually become more accepted and not maybe such an issue. And that's actually what I look forward to, honestly, because I don't like people fighting. We should all just be able to get along. And so I'm hoping that as time goes on, people just go in and get married and it's not that big a deal. Maybe at some point in the future, she may have a change of heart, Not likely, but it's possible. And, at least, we're still allowing people to get married. And I think that's the important thing, that it's at least happening here. And I'm kind of losing my train of thought. What was the question again?
Do you think that Rowan County will continue to have problems such as this?
It will always have its own little problems, because there is that whole clash of conservative, progressive, and our leadership. So I think it will come out in minor ways, maybe nothing so major or public as last summer.
As you know, Rowan County has a large campus presence with Morehead State University. Do you think that the university's presence made a difference in this issue?
Somewhat. It made a difference in the sense of the students, I think, have helped create Morehead to be a more liberal, progressive place. But as far as MSU showing presence during the protests last summer, we didn't really see that. And it wasn't really a student problem because a lot of students weren't there during the summer. And there were some who wished they could be, but lived elsewhere. But as far as like an official stance or presence, there really wasn't one. And it would have been nice if there had been.
Do you believe that Rowan County and the city of Morehead, do you believe it's an inclusive place?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's why I moved here, because it seemed more, progressive, inclusive. It seemed a rare find for Eastern Kentucky, So, yeah, I absolutely believe it's an inclusive place, and it has the potential to become even more so.
Do you think the actions that unfolded that summer affected the reputation of inclusivity?
I think it helped cast a watchful eye. I think that whereas before people may have seen like local leadership being a little more harsh toward the LGBT community or any other sort of outlying minority, we may have just sort of turned a blind eye to it, but now we actually hold them accountable and say, no, you can't really get away with this. You're a public official, you're held to a higher standard. So I think that we probably will hold our local officials more accountable than what we used to. Because even, when we voted for, the county clerk, a lot of people go, well, county clerk, that's not a big deal. That doesn't do a lot. It doesn't matter who we vote in. And then all of a sudden you realize, well, I guess it does. Because they actually do hold more power than you think. Yeah.
And did you vote for the county clerk?
I did. I kind of regret that now.
How did that make you feel that somebody you voted for went against beliefs that you hold strongly?
It made me realize that I need to better educate myself. Before I would just vote along party lines. And now I actually I do a little more research to see if a public official that I'm going to elect actually falls in line mostly with what I think. Of course, everybody's going to differ here and there, but I actually do research now, whereas I mostly just trust it, it'll be all right.
Do you think this issue painted a light on local government and its inner workings?
I think so. I think it's helped educate people, or at least taught them to think for themselves and educate themselves.
In your eyes, is the debate over religious liberty and marriage equality, is it settled?
I don't really think so. I think there's still a big backlash. But are things ever really settled? Like the Black Civil Rights Movement. Sure, we saw big outcomes. We saw, people gaining rights. But when it trickles down to little communities in certain states, how much does it affect them personally? There are still some really southern communities that are more segregated. Some of them just in the past few years held their first, integrated proms. So I think we will be seeing it kind of trickle down into our lives. But in a bigger sphere, there's still that, kind of trying to find a new balance. So I know it's not over yet, but the tide has turned.
So you don't think it's just marriage equality? You believe that many of the social rights battles that have been fought over the years have not been completely settled?
No, there's very much a clash of ideologies. There's I was actually reading an article not too long ago showing that the United States is undergoing two major demographical shifts right now, when usually you only see one in a generation. So we're seeing more, instead of a triangle going from younger people to older people, it's more of a rectangle. So we're seeing about an equal amount of older and younger. So we're going an age demographical shift. And we're also going under a shift between minority and majority, where the tide is starting to turn between not just racial minorities, but also, LGBTQ or other sort of minorities. There is a shift between that and the more traditional. And so we're kind of butting heads on both sides as we're trying to figure out this new balance in America. So it's not just progressive and conservative. It's trying to find where we are with this new America. And you get people who are trying to hold on to what makes them comfortable and familiar. And you're getting people who are going, I don't want to make you comfortable. I just want to be me. You shouldn't have to silence yourself to make somebody else more comfortable, because that's sort of oppressive. And I don't think that the other side really realizes that. They feel like people are just trying to be up in their face, whereas they're just trying to be themselves and don't want to be oppressed. And there's a difference. Yeah.
Near the beginning of the interview, you said that you weren't very active with your activism.
Yeah.
Do you think that this issue has ignited a fire in you, or will you continue your activism?
Oh, most certainly I will continue. It has just made me want to work more toward equality and, not just the LGBTQ community, but just I've always sort of been more of a, I guess, a social equality promoter, as opposed, some people call themselves social justice warriors. I'm not a fighter. I am like a lover, promote what you love instead of bashing what you hate. So I'd rather promote social equality than be out there fighting. But yeah, it's definitely ignited a fire in me that I'm still going to be doing this probably years on down the road. Yeah.
Do you know how? Do you have any idea of how you're going to continue your battle?
Well, for now, I'm just going to continue my involvement in the Rowan County Rights Coalition. And I'll just see where it takes me from there, and because who knows? There's a lot of groups out there that need somebody to give them a lift and a boost. Some people don't have a voice. I have a little bit of a voice, and I don't mind using my voice for them.
So the Rowan County Rights Coalition, is that a locally focused group?
Yeah, it's kind of like the remnants of the people that would come out and protest, daily, weekly. We got to being familiar faces to each other and joined up as our cause. So we just sort of coalesced into this group.
So in your eyes, is it better to tackle these problems at a local level, or do you think that we need to take it from a broader brush?
I think both have their place. Definitely members of the group, we have our talents, and some people are really good at tackling things on a larger level, and some of us are better at focusing down to the local level. And there's definitely a place for both, and so it works out very well.
Are there any other comments or concerns that you'd like to express?
I can't really think of anything, but if you have any ideas or give me something to go on.
Okay. Well, I guess that wraps up our interview, and I'd like to thank you for taking the time.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. It just, one thing I did not anticipate was how it affected everybody's family lives. You had a lot of people where I discussed with quite a few people where there's always this undercurrent of, I can tell my family kind of thinks this way and I think that way, but I just kind of go along to keep the peace. And I started seeing more and more, and even in my own family, where I'm taking a stand that might be a little unpopular with the rest of them. And so you saw this kind of, maybe some people it's more of a fracturing in the family, and some people it's more of, well, this finally needed to be addressed, let's bridge this. So it affected everyone from like a national level, just even down to their family groups. I noticed that.
Do you think those family viewpoints make it harder for people to speak their minds?
Definitely, because, as a general rule, you just want to be loved and accepted and supported by your family. And when you find out that your family is like, greatly, maybe even more so than you suspected, like oppositely viewed, then that becomes even more difficult because you're kind of facing a family backlash.
I'd like to thank you for taking the time, agreeing to meet with me today.
All
Ms.
right.
Lewis. And I hope you have a great day.
All right. Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.